Hi everyone, this video will cover the second part of the learning unit. This is called operant conditioning. In the previous video, I explained classical conditioning, which is when a behavior is learned. Specifically, an involuntary behavior is learned to be performed because of the presentation of a neutral stimulus. Operant conditioning is when a voluntary behavior is learned because of a consequence. So we'll start at the beginning with Edward Thorndyke. Edward Thorndyke started researching and studying this idea of consequences, and he wondered if a consequence would encourage a behavior in an animal. And so he created this puzzle box in which an animal, specifically a cat, would be trapped in a box. And he wanted to see if first the cat could get out of the box by, through trial and error and figuring out the mechanism. He then rewarded the cat, but what he was really looking for was after the cat had got out once and learned how to get out once, when the cat was returned to the box, would the cat repeat that behavior to get the reward again? And he found out that the cat did. And so what he called this was the law of effect. And what he said was if a behavior is followed by a desirable event, then they will likely repeat the action or repeat the behavior. So this was studied further by B.F. Skinner. And B.F. Skinner went on further to look into different types of consequences like reinforcements and punishments and different types of reinforcements and different types of punishments and schedules of reinforcements. And what B.F. Skinner did was he really opened this field of how consequences shape and mold our behavior and actions. And he called this operant conditioning. And operant conditioning is just simply that consequences shape our behavior. So in this video, you'll see one of his pigeons that he has trained through consequences to perform specific behaviors. So that was quick. But if you were paying attention, the pigeon pecked on the tile when the tile said peck. The pigeon turned in a circle when the tile said turn. And you might have noticed that the pigeon was ducking its head into this little opening and picking up some treats. And what B.F. Skinner realized was that through shaping, through reinforcing, he could teach all kinds of behaviors to pigeons, and he could do this through reinforcing them and punishing them. So one thing that is important to know about B.F. Skinner is how he did this. So he created an operant chamber. Many people today call this Skinner's box. So this operant chamber has different mechanisms inside. Let's start with the lights. You can see the lights are called signal lights. These are also called a discriminative stimulus. What these do are these lights signal to the animal that it is time to do the behavior. So if the light turns on, it lets the animal know, now do the behavior and you'll be reinforced. So the animal can discriminate when the behavior should be performed. The next thing that's important to understand is that he would give different types of consequences. So one consequence would be a reinforcement. A reinforcement encourages a behavior. So you can see just to the right of those lights is a food dispenser, and that would issue a reinforcement that would let the animal know to continue the behavior. A punishment discourages a behavior. It decreases the likelihood of that behavior continuing. And he had that shock generator. You can see below there's that electric grid that would issue a small shock that would let the animal know not to do that behavior again. Shaping was a technique he used to get the animal to the desired behavior that he was hoping it would perform. So the animal didn't just automatically know that B.F. Skinner wanted him to turn around in a circle and peck that tile. He had to use shaping. And shaping is where you issue a reinforcement not on the desired behavior, because they're likely not going to do the desired behavior right away, but when they're close. So they might not be doing exactly what you want them to do, but they're getting close. And every time they get closer and closer, you continue to reinforce them until they realize what the desired behavior is. So that is what shaping is. There are schedules to reinforcement as well. You can continuously reinforce by giving a reinforcement every single time the desired behavior is performed, but that's not always practical. And then the animal might not continue that behavior if the reward is not going to be present. So B.F. Skinner created partial reinforcement schedules where a reinforcement was given after a certain amount of behaviors or after a certain amount of time, and he realized that some of these schedules were more effective at producing the behaviors than others. So let's start with the fixed reinforcement schedule. So we'll start with the first column. Fixed means set or determined, unchanging. So a reinforcement can be given after a fixed ratio or a set number of behaviors. So we have all different kinds of reinforcement schedules like this built into our society. The one I think of most often are punch cards. Punch cards are fixed ratio reinforcement schedules. So a punch card you might get from like a coffee shop might say after the 10th punch or the 10th purchase, we punch your card and you can get a free coffee. So what they've done is they've told you you have to perform 10 behaviors or buy 10 coffees, and then we will give you an 11th one free. So a set number of behaviors has to be performed before the reward is presented. A fixed interval means it is set and it's unchanging. It's a determined ratio, or it's a determined reinforcement schedule, and it's after a set amount of time has elapsed. So a fixed interval is a set length of time or time frame has to pass by before the reward is presented. And there's actually a lot of fixed interval reinforcement schedules in our society today. One of those is a paycheck. Many paychecks are issued in fixed interval schedules. Many paychecks aren't necessarily dependent on the exact behaviors you're doing and how many behaviors you're doing, but on a time frame. So typically paychecks are issued every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. And this is a fixed interval that your reinforcement will come after a certain time has elapsed. Variable means that it is changing. So every time a reinforcement is given, it is different. Time to time, it's different. So a variable ratio means that it is an unpredictable or varying number of behaviors must be performed before a reward is presented. So that means you don't know how many times you have to perform that behavior before you will get the reinforcement. An example of this is a slot machine. So with a slot machine, you have to perform a behavior. So maybe you're pushing a button or you're pulling a lever, and you don't know which time it is that you will get the reinforcement. It could be after you've played the game 2 times, or you've pulled the lever 2 times, you might be reinforced. Or maybe it's after I push the button 3 times. I don't know how many times I have to play the game. It could be the next time, or maybe the next time. And so this creates a really high response rate because you don't know if it's going to be the next time that you're issued the reinforcement. A variable interval reinforcement schedule is when you are reinforced after a varying amount of time. And so maybe it's 5 minutes that you're reinforced, and then the next time it's 10 minutes. But it's not dependent on your behaviors. It's dependent on a time frame that's elapsed. An example I think of for a variable interval is getting a message on your phone. It's really not dependent on how many times you check your phone. You could check your phone 50 times in a minute, and it's not going to change whether you get that message or not. You just have to wait. And it could be 5 minutes or it could be 10 minutes before you get a message. And it's just a variable interval schedule, which means an unpredictable amount of time will elapse before you're reinforced. So there are also different types of consequences. Reinforcements increase the behavior. So if a reinforcement is issued, it's likely that the behavior will continue. Reinforcements can be positive or negative, and that doesn't mean good or bad. So really try to remember that positive means something has been added and negative means something has been taken away, but that doesn't mean good or bad. A reinforcement always increases the behavior, regardless of whether it is positive or negative. For example, a positive reinforcement is when something is given to you and you, because of that thing that has been given, you're likely to keep doing that behavior. For example, you're given a good grade, you're likely to continue studying because you want to continue getting those good grades. Or maybe you're given money after you have good grades and you're likely to continue doing that because you want to keep getting money. And so you're getting something, you are getting a positive reinforcement. A negative reinforcement is when something has been taken away from you, and because that thing has been taken away from you, you want to continue doing the behavior. So an example of a negative reinforcement might be taking medication. Maybe you want to continue taking that medication and you will continue doing that behavior because the medication is taking away your symptoms. So you will keep doing that behavior. It's reinforcing because it's taking away those symptoms that you have. Running could be negatively reinforcing because it's taking away stress. And so maybe you keep running every day because it's taking away that stress that you have in your life. Putting on a seatbelt is often negatively reinforced because you want to keep on doing that behavior of putting on your seatbelt because it takes away that annoying beeping sound. So a negative reinforcement is not a bad thing. It's just something has been taken away from you, and because that was taken away from you, you want to keep doing the behavior. A punishment decreases behavior, so it's a consequence that stops the behavior from occurring. And the same thing with positive and negative. Positive means something's been added, and so you decrease the behavior because something's been given to you. So for example, if I'm trying to train a dog, I could give the dog a positive punishment whenever the dog was doing something I did not want them to do. I could take a water bottle and spray the dog if the dog is like barking at the door, and that would signal to the dog, do not do that behavior again. I added that annoying feeling of water being sprayed in your face. That's a positive punishment because it was added. A negative punishment means something's been taken away from you, and therefore you will try to stop doing that behavior because you don't want what has been taken away from you. So for example, a negative punishment could be if a parent takes away your privileges. So they want you to stop doing a behavior, so they take away your privileges, maybe your phone or your keys, because they want to decrease that behavior that you're doing. So they take that away. So try to remember that reinforcement increases a behavior, punishments decrease behavior, and then positive and negative just means something has been added or something has been taken away. So there are different types of reinforcers. These are things that make your behaviors continue. A primary reinforcer is a reinforcement that is innately satisfying. You did not have to learn that it was pleasurable. Food is an example of a primary reinforcer. You did not have to learn its value. Food is innately satisfying. So is water. It's innately satisfying. However, there are other kinds of reinforcers that you have to learn have value, or they're also called conditioned reinforcers, things like money, certificates, tokens. Those are all things that they are reinforcing, but you had to learn that it had value. Money doesn't innately satisfy. If you gave money to a baby, it would not really be reinforcing because they don't yet know its value. So a primary reinforcer innately satisfies and you don't have to learn its value. A secondary reinforcer, you have to learn its value and it is still reinforcing but not innately. All right, so our last piece is applying operant conditioning principles. So there are all kinds of practical applications of operant conditioning in everyday life. For example, like training pets or in sports, we can use all different kinds of shaping techniques to reinforce. Praise is a great way to try to shape and continue a behavior. In a work environment, reinforcements can be really a great addition to enhance productivity. One thing about reinforcements, though, they need to be immediate and not, 10 weeks later. But there are lots of practical applications of operant conditioning in our everyday life. There is something that is a biological type of training and feedback that we get called biofeedback. It's basically a machine that allows you to train yourself. It allows you to get feedback about stress responses. And so when you get that feedback, you can try different types of responses to train yourself to recognize those, to then have a proper stress response. So biofeedback is an operant conditioning technique that you can use. As far as the rest goes, there's one more piece that's just important that we know is that continuous reinforcement. So if you reinforce after every single behavior, oftentimes that leads to diminished motivation, that there's not an intrinsic desire to continue that behavior if they're always expecting the reward. So I hope this was all really helpful. Today was operant conditioning. Reach out to me if you have any questions. Have a great day.